I did stream Space Marine here on the channel, and that game was incredible. I'm super interested to learn what Mandalore thought of it though, and maybe some of the technical stuff behind it. And what I'm very interested in is to learn about his opinions about the final battle, which, yeah, it was a thing. Beautiful. Just a family-friendly game for everybody to enjoy during the holidays, you know?
The dark chill of winter is here, so it's the perfect time to talk about a game that takes place entirely on a factory hell planet. Good old Space Marine, third-person shooter and home to the world's most honest main menu. If you have any cultural or religious objections to orc violence, well, now's the time to go. For Captain Titus here, peace on Earth comes from orc genocide. The only Christmas treats he carries detonate above ground for maximum flavor. That didn't make sense. Okay, it's not a Christmas game. In fact, Warhammer has some better candidates, but maybe another time. Now, as you know, Warhammer 40K has a very rich and huge universe, review. So rather than me explain it, let's have the game do it.
We also streamed Mechanicus too. That was really fun. I love turn-based strategy. Not really like a huge action fan.
Yeah, the end.
Real-time action.
For being a game introducing a new audience to the series, it really does nothing at all to explain
But this game is fun.
You do learn that orcs are invading a planet. While normally the Imperium might just bomb them from orbit, there's a big boxy Evangelion you have to protect down there. So what do they do?
Titan.
Send the Space Marines. It's a simple setup and you really don't need to know the lore. You just need to be Blue Man and shoot Green Man in the face. So really this is the opposite of the Halo series. But I'm not so sure about later on. I'd imagine new people to be confused, but it's not a deal breaker. So just focus on this for now. I'll come back to all that in a bit.
I would say lore-wise, it doesn't really delve too far into the lore. There might be some references you wouldn't get if you didn't know anything about 40K, but it really shines when it comes to its gameplay. Like, the loop is just so satisfying. Like, do you even need to know what's going on? I think not.
The game is nearing a decade old now, and it certainly looks the part. Some textures are low-res, can noticeably pop in, and the same can be said for things out in the distance. The lighting is still nice, and there are good little details like the reflections in the armor. It's nothing landmark, but not bad either. I do appreciate it more based on just the sheer scale of the environment. It sure looks the part of a planetary factory. There are...
Yeah. Well, I will have to agree that some of the graphics are kind of outdated. I am actually kind of thankful for it, because I was able to play it quite smoothly on my dinosaur of a PC. My 1050 Ti did this very well.
Some huge real 3D objects that in most other games would just be out in the skybox. Take this crane that's the size of Rhode Island. It's slowly turning, doing its thing. Then when you fight under it, you realize that the entire thing and every greeble on it is casting a shadow. So sacrifices had to be made to give the authentic scale. Technically sound one moment, questionable in another. This game does have some bland areas, but a lot more are really inspired. Pulling off the everything is a cathedral and a factory aesthetic can't be easy.
Dude. When I strolled down this hallway, I was like, oh boy. So what the game is telling me is that at some point these turrets are going to be shooting at me instead. Well, like, it's such great map design.
But they pulled it off, and they gave the setting some strong art direction with a lot of attention to little details. However, what you see here is what you get. There's not a ton of variety. If you can't stand games that are just brown or gray, then stay far away from this one. It's not all a mixed bag though, because what really stands out to me is the animation. Relic's reputation for the Dawn of War Saint kills continues well into this game. They're just as impressive as they are violent. Like Dawn of War, it seems like every time I replay this game, I find
I still need to play Dawn of War. I will stream that at some point. We're currently playing through Total War Warhammer, and once I'm done with my first campaign, I might like make that a rogue stream and then move on to something else. I'll have to decide. There's just so many Warhammer games and Warhammer 40K games out there that I have yet to play.
Couple more.
It was so good. Just so satisfying. They also change depending on your weapon too.
As also expected from Relic, the combat and weapons sound excellent. Some people thought the Space Marine sounds in Dawn of War 1 were lacking, but they more than made up for it here.
I see. Oh, the Chaos Space Marines. These guys were so difficult to deal with. If you didn't have the right weapon, I think you could just one-shot him with a sniper.
They knew combat would be so chaotic that you might not be looking at your ammo count. So some weapons actually sound different when they're low on ammo to tell you that you need to reload soon.
Oh, I didn't notice. Ah, actually, you know what? I did. But it just felt so natural, right? Like, it's not really something that you think about. I wasn't exactly looking at the game from a perspective of somebody reviewing it, so yeah, I didn't mention it.
The soundtrack is another high point. It's not Relic's best soundtrack, but it accents a lot of moments in the game perfectly. The orchestra music can border on being generic, but when the horns really get going, they get going.
I would say the soundtrack was just good enough to get you into the world and immersed in the action that you were going through.
Honestly, I find parts of the soundtrack kind of hilarious. It reminded me of Starship Troopers or RoboCop a lot because the music's really heroic, but the most horrific shit is happening on screen.
I've never seen Starship Troopers. I'm sorry. Oh yeah, this part. Yep. They're just gone.
Yeah,
the
this
majority
is
of them
for the
died.
Ultramarines. While the environmental sounds are okay, my biggest issue with the sound is the mixing on some of the voices. It's odd because the Dawn of War games have some of the best stuff in video games, but here, it's really out of whack.
Really?
Even cranking the voice audio level above everything else didn't always help
Looking
it.
forward to that.
Damaged at least?
Titan Invictus seems unused, you mean? Is this invasion not enough to bring out the War Titans?
It takes hundreds to get a War Titan
Oh.
operational site.
Are you wounded?
That's what it is. I see.
The Codex Astartes warns against using jump packs to leap blindly into enemy fire, and for good reason.
Your days as a novice are behind you. Why do you still interpret the Codex and...
So that sucks, but luckily it's a very small portion of the game compared to the combat. They had their priorities in order. We should talk about that, shouldn't we?
I mean, the combat is super fun.
Space Marine is all combat. No platforming, no tact on puzzles, no nothing. And you know what? The combat is pure joy. You have 5 weapons at a time, a choice
Agreed.
of pistol, a bolter, 2 other weapons, and then your melee weapon. The level of destruction you unleash is just absurd. You're like an atomic bomb if an atomic bomb was a big metal fist. There's so much impact to the combat. Your enemies don't just get shot and fall over, they usually blow up. You upgrade some of your weapons during the campaign and have plenty of opportunities to switch things out. So you have a lot of room to experiment until you find the chosen way. There's a great variety of weapons, and while they're not the most creative thing, they get more destructive over time. There's nothing like mowing down a crowd with a storm bolter or becoming a human meteor with a thunder hammer. There are some challenging parts, but even on hard, this is more of a power fantasy game. You have 2 melee buttons, a hit man button and a stun.
Okay. I think on hard, the main issue is that you usually run out of ammo. And to be fair, I died quite a few times even while playing on normal. I'm just not used to these kind of games. As a turn-based strategy player, as well as a card game player, this wasn't really my territory, so maybe for somebody who plays a lot of action games, like hard is the place to be. But yeah, no. Some of those guys did a ton of damage. I don't know how I would fare.
So it can feel like a mash fest, and it's like this for every close combat weapon. Most of the thinking comes from deciding when to do an execution move. These can only be done on most of your enemies when they're stunned. If you pull it off, you get a gory display and you get some health back. Your overshield recovers over time, your red bar does not. At the same time, you're not invincible during these execution moves, so if you time them poorly, the other Jolly Green Giants will start mugging you. So you can't rely entirely on ranged combat to stay alive. Space Marine wants to use a fine artisan blend, and that's the strongest point of the combat. Because it controls so simply, you can seamlessly change between ranged and melee fighting. You don't fight the camera, you don't need to lock on, it feels very natural. When you murder enough, you fill up your Fury meter. Popping this off recharges your health and makes your attacks...
I think, yeah, there is something to be said about how simplistic it is. Like, the game understands what it is, the devs understand what players want, and the players play it and they feel exactly what the devs intended, you know? While there are, like, some combos in the game, it's not really needed. You might as well just like mash your buttons and get rid of all the enemies anyways. It's still fun, right? The purpose of the game is to mow down as many enemies as possible, so no need to do anything fancy.
and more dangerous. This also upgrades and eventually lets you shoot in slow motion. And that's as deep as it goes. This isn't Devil May Cry. As much as I'd love air juggling Gretchens, you just can't do that, you could just slap them into the Shadow Realm. So if you love those kinds of games, you might find Space Marine lacking. Even the ranged combat is simple compared to a lot of third-person shooters. The game has no cover system, that was probably part of the marketing. Maybe it's because cats were already going to call it a Gears ripoff because of the chain sword, I don't know. It didn't matter most of the time, but on occasion, and especially in the later parts of the game, I think a basic one for big objects would have helped, because you're still hiding behind a box and awkwardly popping out to shoot, but then again this might just be more noticeable and hard because their bullets hurt you more. So overall, it's a simple system, but effective. The execution mechanic encourages you to be very aggressive, and also you want to switch things up to keep your Fury meter going. I always wondered if Doom 2016 got the idea for the execution health mechanic from this game. At the same time, enemies dropping health has been a thing forever, so who knows.
I mean, I can see the inspiration there if there was any, but like, it's probably not a direct thing. There was a ton of other games, right, that have done it before. I did play Doom, and the glory kills there were incredible. It also just felt really, really good to play.
The spectacle and the impact of the combat is enjoyable to watch and really easy to pull off. I mean, I've replayed this game a few times, they're doing something right. It's an ideal system for most of the game, but it does come back to hurt it in some other ways.
Haven't
so let's talk
replayed
about
it yet.
The gameplay pacing.
Yeah, there's these moments. Well, I mean, I was streaming the game, so like these moments kind of gave me an opportunity to read all the lore that you guys were putting into the chat. But if I was playing it alone, I'd probably just like go onto an elevator and just like pick up my phone or something while the camera. I guess it was meant to hide a loading screen, but still, right? Like, it's a downtime in a otherwise action-packed game.
The first 2/3 of this game has excellent pacing. It ramps everything up just the right way. Every level there's something new to fight, and besides them you typically have at least one new item and upgrade. They keep things fresh, you're never bogged down in one area for too long. Then for one level the new orc enemies stopped coming, which is a shame. It wasn't like there was nothing to draw from. An enemy like Burna Boys would make you stay more on your toes in melee. One part of this section has a huge dust storm going on. This would have been the perfect opportunity to bring in some stealth enemies like orc commandos. Unfortunately the only trick the orcs have left at this point are numbers, which they always do. Then right after this is a level of fighting turrets, and that's it. But they are scary. Then, holy shit, Chaos is here. A whole new faction to fight. I guess they're on the cover. I was surprised. I went, wow, these demons can dodge my ammunition. But could they dodge all my ammunition?
If you pour enough bullets into a demon, it'll eventually die.
The game doesn't have many Chaos units. They're treated as an elite group. Their entrance is great and heralds the way for a three-way war, but fighting Chaos itself isn't as fun as fighting the orcs. The game's strength is mixing up styles to fight hordes of enemies, and Chaos Boys are bullet sponges. Their weapons are also accurate and hit hard, making you shuffle around cover more. This is where you really start to notice the shortcomings of the combat systems, if you haven't already. Now I'm playing something that feels much more like a cover shooter without the cover mechanic.
Yeah, Mandalore's right on this one. It kind of felt a bit different, like you had to approach the game differently than you were when you were fighting the orcs. Because when you're fighting the orcs, you just cut down everything, right? But when you're fighting Chaos, since they hit so incredibly hard, then you're just kind of like having to hide behind boxes and waiting and then like tactically poking out and shooting them and then going back behind it. Which kind of is counterintuitive to the original, the first part of the game, I would say. Personally, I appreciated the mix-up. I didn't really have any problems with it, but it is certainly different, and the combat system wasn't really built around that because, well, you literally can't like press a button to hide behind cover. You just kind of have to like move over behind it, and sometimes it can still shoot you through the corners and depending on the hitbox and whatnot. But yeah, it's certainly a switch up. I was okay with it, but other people, maybe not.
Until this point, orc weapons are comically inaccurate. You still get hit, but most of their shots go all over the place because they're just excited to be shooting a gun off. These guys are the exact opposite, so you have to change your mind and your loadout to be more range-oriented. It's still fine, there are good fights here, but it's when things start feeling off and it perfectly foreshadows the end of the game. I'll just say for now, the final boss is a quick-time event. The story itself is difficult.
Yeah. The ending of the game is pretty much the weakest part of the entire game, which is kind of a shame. I think the arena battle before the final boss was good, But obviously, you know, that QTE was just, it was just dumb. They could have done it differently, but I don't know. I guess that was just the thing during those days where you'd have like a bunch of QTE events. I don't really know whether people back then found it fun. I never did. But if you guys watching this know more about that era of gaming than me, then let me know. I'm kind of ignorant on these kind of things. I only got into it quite late.
To talk about because it's so straightforward. What do I say about the cover me while I hack the store mission or the blow this thing up mission? I think I got more out of world building moments like guardsmen revering space marines when they see them. Or the announcements. An alien invasion is no excuse for being late to work.
Quotas must be met. Despite alien incursions, delinquency is an affront to the chief.
Oh yeah, the orcs are having a fight club in the loading bay, but don't worry, we'll make those pipes just fine. Also, if you've played this game before, the collectible audio logs don't return to the game. You can listen to them when you pick them up and walk around, but if you already have one, you have to listen to them in the menu. And you can't listen to them while walking around.
Experimentation with the warp.
This is kind of not good in my opinion. Yeah, I just want to get back to the combat, but I also want to be like respectful of the lore and I guess at least learn a bit about what's going on in the story. But it kind of just forces you to like stand still and listen to it. And it's super easy to accidentally just collect it without even listening to it since you have to hold down on it, but sometimes I forget it and just press the button. It's okay. I don't remember how they did it in Doom 2016. I think there were those like stones or whatever that you could activate or like logs that you could listen to, but I think you can move around, or maybe if you move too far it would go away. But I think in Doom Eternal, I didn't play that game, so you guys can correct me on this one. I believe you just collect it and then you can also always just open up the menu to read it in the log instead, which I would say it's a better thing to do, because like then you're actively choosing that, yeah, I want to take a break now and then, you know, read through the lore and stuff, rather than kind of the game saying, stop, here's lore time, right?
Experimentation with the warp in it. Transmechanic second class patrol.
Yeah, so get used to some quiet hallways in another playthrough. So now I'm gonna get into story spoilers, and honestly, there's not a whole lot here. I'll still leave a courtesy code to skip to.
It's pretty bare bones.
Okay, they're gone. I really don't know what they're trying to save themselves for. So the game starts with we need to murder orcs, and that's how it stays most of the way through. We have the titular Captain Titus, Captain Titus, grizzled veteran friend Sidonis, and Matt Ward's stand-in Leo. Leonidas? Leonardo?
This guy.
I don't remember. Leandros.
Cringe.
Okay. He's the new guy still clutching his Blueberry Boy Scout menu. Many orcs die, and then you meet an Inquisitor who has a plan to kill even more orcs. He wants to use a warp-powered device to obliterate all of them. I don't know. The real Inquisitor was killed by a demon, and you got tricked into bringing chaos into the world. So we were fighting Boss Grimskull and the orcs the whole game, but now we have a new bad guy. So this Chaos Lord is the main target now. Even before this, Leonard is giving Titus a bunch of shit because he can resist the warp for some reason. He can't see beyond his own stupid book, so grizzled old Sidonis has to calm him down.
Codex Astartes warns that those in league with chaos can withstand the warp's touch.
You forget yourself, Ultramarine.
And then he
Then
dies,
Sidonis
obviously.
dies, so Leopold is even more suspicious now. So then Titus goes to beat up the Chaos Lord while he's actively ascending into a demon. This is a good way of showing loyalty. Also, it is really strange that the boss fight's a QTE because there were 2 other bosses in the game, and they weren't good. At this point, they may have realized the combat wasn't ideal for these kinds of fights, they just said forget it. Anyways, Titus caves his skull in, and it's all happily ever.
That makes sense. In retrospect, the combat was built around horde gameplay, but when it's a 1v1, not so much. It has been a while, so maybe I don't remember every single boss fight. I remember the one against the Orc Chief, or War Boss, I think they're called. And then there were like 2 or 3 airplane fights, which were kind of meh. I just had to run around like I just kept running around the arena trying to avoid as many bullets as possible while trying to shoot it down, but also having absolutely terrible aim, so I'd miss most of my shots, so the fights would last super long. And then the Orc Chief was kind of easy. He was really, you just kind of had to sidestep him, and then just keep on shooting him. Like, the ads would come in, and it would be kind of annoying, but it really wasn't much to deal with. So then what would you do for the final boss if you didn't make it a QTE event? What kind of abilities would he have that the other Chaos Space Marines did not have? I guess maybe use of the magic through the warp? But then how would you implement that into the gameplay structure? Because I don't think making him just a bullet sponge would be any better. Well, I don't know. I'm not a game designer nor a game reviewer. I'm just a streamer, so I think I'll leave it at it is what it is, and hope that in Space Marine 2, this won't happen again.
After from there.
I see the Ultramarines are human, after all.
More than you know, Lieutenant.
Superhuman, but still human.
Nope, the Inquisition is here to ruin everyone's day. Again.
There it is. The man. Cringe. Leonidas. Leo, whatever his name was.
You are certain of this charge?
Captain Titus has been corrupted by Chaos, Inquisitor Thrax.
I am no heretic.
This was not how the final cutscene went.
So he gets arrested. What was the warp thing all about? How can he resist it? We'll find out in game 2, but now we'll never find out. The game doesn't have many characters, and it doesn't develop them.
Now we'll never find out? Oh boy. I can't wait to see Mandalore's review on Space Marine 2 once that game comes out. Speaking of, I haven't even checked out any of like the trailers or the breakdowns of anything in that game. I think the Tyranid show up somehow. And I think the sequel to Space Marine is actually Bolt Gun. And then you go into Space Marine 2, from what you guys have been telling me. I think that's how it is. I could be misremembering it though. With Bolt Gun being a completely different style of game, it's more like Doom than Space Marine was.
Out either. I kind of like some of them, but I don't really know them. Even the squad mates here with the whole game talk about nothing else besides the mission. This is no Bad Company or Republic Commando. I wish the conflict between buy the book or interpret the codex was fleshed out more. It could have made the position Leroy is in more sympathetic, and there was opportunity to do this. I wish that instead of just talking about the mission, they talked about each other more. There are plenty of places to put stuff in.
Though he is trapped on this world.
And all the more desperate to recover the power source. We must get it to safety, old friend.
Good news on that front. Lieutenant Mirror reports that the Liberation Fleet has entered the system. The Inquisition will surely have sent agents with the fleet, Captain. Perhaps we can...
Yeah, this got awkward. So,
do you have a concern you'd like to share? Yeah. It's underdeveloped and it ends up being dull. It's not written badly, just so pragmatically that it's not very memorable. Of course, for many, the meat of this game was the multiplayer. It has good character customization, a lot of things to unlock, and plenty of game modes. But you can't search for every mode at once, which means a fractured community, which means not so active multiplayer. You can still find matches for the wave-based Exterminatus going, but for regular multiplayer, you need to find a Steam group. There are some...
I would think that multiplayer is actually kind of booming at the moment since Space Marine 2 got announced. But then again, I also think Sega kind of jacked up the price of the game once they announced Space Marine 2, so...
Some popular ones, so the game isn't dead just yet. In fact, in a way, the multiplayer kind of lives on in another game called... You know what? It's the holidays. I don't want to think about it for now. Space Marine is a...
I have not heard of that game, and I think I have a good idea of why I've never heard of that game.
Short game, but it's worth your time and it goes on sale often. This was going to be a trilogy, but it came out in a very saturated year. It came out 2 weeks before Dark Souls and 2 months before Skyrim, so it wasn't winning any headlines and arguably wasn't even the best orc-killing game that came out that year. It's a tragedy. I always thought a sequel might be a kind of opposite to this game. It would be on a big jungle planet of Tyranids. Well, for the time being, I don't think any of us are seeing that. But wait, there are other Warhammer games. Sure, some are unbearable shovelware, but there are some good ones too. Some great ones even.
What is this?
I'll look at some of those in the new year.
Was that the... I think the other one was like that game where you play as a Tau, was it? I forget its name, but I think there is one, which is a much older FPS game.
After a return to a remake and an adventure game. For now, have a wonderful Christmas, even if it's just us tonight. Could be worse.
Yeah. That's great. I love that. But yeah, Space Marine is still a pretty good game. I would highly recommend it to anybody who enjoys that type of shooter. And I hope that Space Marine 2 is amazing. I hope it is. Please be good.